All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, Saturday, the Congress of South African Trade Union, Cosatu, announced the expulsion of its biggest member, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, that, of course, being NUMSA. There have been many developments since, but today we want to look at the possible economic impact of this move. And for some more analysis, we're joined in studio by economic and political analyst Liepollo Lebohang Pheko. Thank you so much for coming in and welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, Leanne.
Analysts have said that the union turmoil will inevitably knock on the shop floor. How can we see this happening?
Well, the different things, I mean, our industrial policy has made great strides in trying to ensure that we have an industry and a sector that's embedded in key particular drivers. So NUMSA, most of the sectors that NUMSA covers, which is automation, the motor industry, construction, manufacturing, etc., would fall well within that. So what we can see is that possibly about these actually contribute about cumulatively 15 to 20% of the GDP. They also contribute to about 50% of the savings on the JSE. So it's a huge, huge impact that they could potentially have. But I think what investors in the market is much more interested in, rather than the fissures between the Trade Union Federation, is the ability for them to continue to do what they need to do, which is to maintain equitable and really rational labor relations. Yeah. That is what the market responds to. It doesn't really care too much about who is in his president, who is aligned to which political party per se, but it's much more concerned about the knock-on effect on productivity of workers and whether or not they are able to get their yield on investment.
Well, certainly, and I mean, when we look at the situation right now, there's a threat that 7 more unions are also looking at dissociating themselves from Cosatu. This productivity you're talking about, surely it is going to be affected.
It might be, but I mean, you know, it also illustrates the extent to which the labor union federations have not perhaps been in touch with the extent to which workers need a different form of value addition. They need to be serviced differently. And this has been coming for a long time. There's the feeling that there has been much more of an emphasis on your downstream productive sectors rather than looking at your secondary and your tertiary sectors, your tertiary skills development. And this is one of the biggest fears of most workers, is that they are becoming more and more superfluous to the workforce. This is what most of the industrial action is about. It's about demanding greater wages, but what industry is saying is that the skills gap between the wage demands and the actual capacity to perform particular on global standards is not quite matching up. Now, I certainly am one of the great proponents for a fair day's wage for a hard day's work. I mean, I think it's incredibly important, but I also think that it's important to see that the way in which manufacturing sector, the mining sector, etc., have evolved over the last 20 to 30 years is not in keeping with the kind of economy that South Africa wants to have. It's not even in keeping with our own national development plan, which is very key as a cog in developing these secondary and tertiary industries.
Yeah. Let's look at the commercial concern of the union. Where are the investments?
Well, I mean, basically, what we're looking at the moment is a union which, as I say, covers the ambit of several sectors at the moment. Yeah. And one thing that's very critical in this is that most unions, for example, have private investment wings. And there's a feeling in which the extent to which there has been a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability in the way that some of these investments are managed. But secondly, it's also the feeling that there isn't really a sense in which for a long time now, there has been much attention given to upskilling labor unions, labor workers, and the trade union movement as a whole. So there has been a huge disconnect between the political contestations which unions find themselves in at the moment and the economic and really worker-related interests for a very long time.
Yeah, but I mean, this is going to hit Cosatu in quite a dramatic way. I mean, if we look at let's almost take out 1 million contributions from the kitty. You know, what is Cosatu going to look like?
It's hard to tell, because remember that we're looking at unions and federations which were, I mean, I was asked the question yesterday, and are we looking at for the rise of the super union? These were all super unions among super unions. So these are like confederations among confederations.
Yeah.
And I think that what's really critical is that it's time to go back to basics. I think that certainly there's been a level of careerism in the trade union movement which has perhaps diverted the leadership and perhaps the rank and file even from what the business of unions is, which is really to look after workers' interests, be concerned with things like skills development, be concerned with issues like international and local workers' solidarity and working conditions. That has not been really a preeminent discourse for a very long time. What a NUM-less Cosatu looks like, a NUMSA-less Cosatu looks like, is one which is greatly diminished, not only in terms of their membership dues, but also in terms of a power base, in terms of a political base. Because remember that this comes from a long time ago. This actually comes from the pre-Polokwane build-up. And it was consolidated after Mangaung. And certainly we're not looking only at what it's going to look like for workers, but because it's become muddied with political and politicking, we're looking at 2016 local government elections, what that will look like, and the next general elections as well. That kind of pool of vote fodder, which Cosatu has traditionally been responsible for delivering to the ANC, is going to be diminished potentially.
Yeah.
And of course, remember that there's some, you know, with the rumours of a kind of a workers' party and all of this sort of thing, it really changes the landscape potentially. And I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Every marriage has a bad day, and perhaps if divorce is imminent, it's what it is.
It is what it is, and the political landscape in South Africa is changing daily, and I think this is going to change it even more. You can only imagine going forward. Thank you for talking to us. I know there's so much more to talk about, but we've got more of it in the news. We saw as well in Zimbabwe, the Cosatu General Secretary breaking his silence last night, even though he didn't join in the press conference. But we've got details in our news that Ayanda's got for us at 7 o'clock. Liepollo Lebohang Pheko, economic and political analyst, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, taking a break.